I'm Mike Costello, and I'm here with Dr. Iris Freelander, and we'd like to talk to you today about exploring the deeper meaning of home. And home conjures up in our thoughts and our feelings all kinds of things, but there is a spiritual home and there is a mental home, isn't there?
Yes, there is. And there's the spiritual home that we can go to. It's been said we can go home to God at any moment, at any time. And that's true. And that's our spiritual home. It used to be when people were ill and they would say, I want to go home. And I always thought they meant home. But actually, it came to me not too long ago that a lot of these people are meaning, especially the older people, that they really want to go to their spiritual home. They want to be out of this world. Do you think that's true?
I think, some people do. I think, there's a school of thought that says that we're all kind of homesick for a spiritual level of reality, and I think that that's probably true. I think we become weary sometimes, excuse me, of the world, but I think at the same time, this sense of being at home and wanting a home. In mind and feeling is so tremendously important. It's always amazing to me how, as we move through our counseling work with people, it doesn't really matter how badly some people's childhood may have been or their younger life, or how many years they're away from a certain place. They want to, at a point in time, go back. And I think that at the core of our being is this desire to recapture something that was or that might have been. And for a lot of people, their spiritual home or their spiritual communion with the presence and the power of God is something that maybe they never even actually had a sense of, but they want so badly. I think today we want peace and we want tranquility and we want health and we want prosperity and we want all of these things, and we want them because that's our nature. I think that's our nature as spiritual beings. It's our nature as perfect and whole children of God. And I think we strive after it, even if we never experienced it. I remember reading a few years ago an article by a psychologist whose name escapes me right now, but he wrote extensively on the issue of the fact that the young people have a nostalgic desire for a way of life that they never experienced. And it has to do with the fact that they see it as something ideal. And I think often in our minds we do see home as the ideal, whether it was or it wasn't. I'm talking now of our physical home. And within ourselves, within our minds and within our being, we can create a space for home, can't we?
Yes, we can. And we see people who are not so young and people who are young who want their parents to keep the home place because they can always go home. And even if they don't visit there very often, it gives them a very sense of security to know that home is there. And a friend of ours, who's a friend who's also a friend of yours, owned a home at Bishop, and when her children were growing up, in their growing up years, and they were very happy in Bishop. And I'm sure, like all families, they had their problems, and it wasn't all as perfect as they idealize it having been. So she had the opportunity recently to buy back that house that she had owned and that the children had grown up in. And she spent 2 days doing the numbers and talking about what work has to be done on the house, and a lot needed to be done on it. But that's not why she didn't buy it. She decided she didn't want that extra burden of a third house again. And she said, and her children now are very in their like 40s or so. So she said my children could band together and buy that house if they wanted. And she wasn't being facetious. She meant if they really do want the house, then they can buy it. But she didn't want to do it because, and I didn't say an opinion at all, but I thought she was very wise to not burden herself with another house, because it is a burden, and it takes a lot of work, and especially for a person who's alone, then they have to do all the work, and that's sometimes too much. But those children it's typically, and what you just said earlier, they were idealizing their childhood and thinking of it as having been perfect.
And home is a perfect place, isn't
Yes.
it? Even if our physical homes and our physical childhood and background isn't ideal and isn't perfect, in our hearts and in our minds, we can go to a wonderful place that is that wonderful and peaceful home. And of course, in spiritual terms, a lot of religious people talk about going home to heaven at some point in time, and a lot of people strive after that, and we certainly don't negate that at all. But we would like people to have heaven in the midst of where they are, and we think that the kingdom teaching and the idea of the home and the reality of our unity with each other and with the Creator is something that is always accessible to us. But in order to be at home and to create that perfect home, we need to go deep within ourselves, and we need to be able to give up some of the things that are keeping us from home, and we need to embrace the things that make a wonderful home. And I know from my personal standpoint, in a physical environment, I like order, and so in my mind and in my heart, I really have to strive to keep my mind in proper order. One of the things we talk about in New Thought a lot is being in the midst of and realizing and claiming divine order in the midst of wherever we are. And my life, like your life and everyone else's, is faced with many challenges and difficulties of daily life. But we really have the ability to claim divine order, to claim that home wherever we are. And of course, that home moves right along with us. It's not something that we come out of and go into that in terms of a physical place, although it is that. It is more a place that we go in and out of in our minds and in our hearts and in our feelings.
Yes, and there's in the newspaper now, they're featuring that book, Tuesdays with Maury Schwartz, who had been a college professor until he died at age 80. And then in today's paper, they had people write about the happiest moment of their life. And so there was one man who said he had been through a lot, and he had been through alcoholism, and he had been through 2 divorces, and he had been through a stint in the Navy, a great number of years in the Navy. And so, but he said now he lives in one room, and reading that book gave him a new perspective that he's happy in his one room because he's content within himself. And isn't that a very lovely thing, that this man has been through a lot of travail and a lot of problems in his life, but he sees that he's responsible. And so because he's happy within himself, he's happy in just one room. And all that goes with just one room, low, not very much funds. And but that was very inspiring to me, that this man had realized where his priorities lie.
And just as you were speaking, I was thinking about our minds in terms of being at home with ourselves and being at home in our environment and where we are and the place where we are in life. And in our minds, there are many rooms, aren't there?
Yes.
And there are rooms that bring happiness, and there are rooms that are disheveled, and there are rooms that that are beautiful, and there are rooms that are filled with pain and suffering. There are rooms that are angry. And as we move from room to room within the home of our mind, we are able to identify how it is we think and how it is we create the world in which we live. And of course, we do create the world in which we live through our thought process. And the way that we think determines so much about the quality of our life.
Exactly. And we get help in unexpected ways. We get help from a chance encounter where someone says something that's very meaningful to us, and we put that together with our own circumstances. And our dreams can bring us a lot of new information. I remember when you were speaking, I was just remembering years ago, like 30 to 35 or 40 years ago, I went through a series of dreams where I was dreaming of houses that I lived in, but they were altered. And of course, it was just my own consciousness I was seeing, but I was seeing it in the dream in the form of a house, because I think our higher self sends us these dreams that we can understand and to give meaning to us. And then we have the aha experience of seeing exactly what it is. So it was showing us, and one dream that was very significant that stayed with me and still stays with me to this day very clearly was I was seeing the basement of a house that I lived in, but it didn't have in real life, it didn't have a basement, but in this dream, it had a basement. And then it had an attic, and it had all different appendages that had not been in the real life. But I could put that dream together and see a great deal. It gave me direction in my life, the direction I was seeking. And it also gave me a contentment with my situation in life at that time, which in some people's view might not be all that desirable. But it was a growing experience that I was going through. And so my dreams helped bring this into perspective for me. So I think it's important that we listen to our own mind, to our daydreaming thinking, and also to our dreams, because our higher self is giving us information in a way that we can understand and use it.
Absolutely. And we're constantly being given information.
Mm-hmm.
We're constantly being given guidance in the things that we need to know and understand more clearly.
Mm-hmm.
And just as you were speaking, I was thinking about that as you described the basement. And so often we do feel that we're in the basement of life, don't we? And so many times difficulties come, and depression and illness and
Mm-hmm.
limited financial resources, the loss of jobs, the ending of relationships, all kinds of negative experiences. But we're able to come up out of the basement and into the many rooms of our home,
Mm-hmm.
the home of our mind and of who we really are, and then to go into the attic, which is really symbolic of the higher self.
Yes.
And we can go up into that attic, and that attic is filled, we don't have attics anymore, but attics used to be filled with all the remembrances.
Yeah.
Isn't that the way it was? And so the attic was so often filled with remembrances, and it was always, I think of books and stories that we've seen in the past where people have taken their children and grandchildren into the attic and shown them so much of the richness of their life. And so our lives are much like a home, isn't it?
Yes, they certainly are. And furthermore, we have a shadow self. Like we have 7 aspects of our being, and then an 8th aspect would be the shadow. And Carl Jung brought that clearly into view, the shadow self. But one time I dreamed that there was and our shadow is always the same sex. And there was an old hag chasing me, and she chased me into a building and then into a room with just one door, and the door closed behind me, and there was no windows and no other doors. And I had to, so that meant I was facing something in my life that I had to face, and I faced it.
And that ugliness chased you. I can't imagine that had nothing to do with you, Iris. You're a radio person, but that difficulty did chase you into where you were. We'd like to pause at this point in the program and offer you an opportunity to receive some literature so that you can study the concepts and ideas we're sharing with you.
We would like to offer you the opportunity to receive one of these free booklets to further your understanding of the new thought message of confident living. Each month we will feature a different booklet, which will be mailed to you free and postage paid. Simply address your request to Confident Living at P.O. Box 7726, Long Beach, California, 90807.
Before the break, you were talking about this dream that you had had. I wonder what came of that. How
Well,
did you come out of that?
I was seeing I was going through a period of difficulty in my life, and I was seeing myself more clearly, and the dream had to come that way in order for me to be objective, because we all have a tendency to say, or at least I would have a tendency to say, oh no, that's not me. No, that doesn't pertain to my present life. It's too complicated, and it has nothing to do with it. But when it comes through in that fashion, we can't ignore it because it's so blatantly clear. And so I could see changes I need to make in my character, and changes I need to make in my thinking in order for my character to be more refined. And so yes, I saw very clearly a new path that I needed to take, and that's what I'd been searching for.
And that this idea that we're exploring and looking at in terms of the deeper meaning of home, uh, it is a time for many of us, not only the basement and the attic experiences, but we spend our lives in the rooms of our life and in the rooms of feeling comfortable about ourselves and about life. And life becomes so much more fulfilling for us when we are at home and at ease. And sometimes it helps to open the windows, doesn't it? Open the windows and doors and let some fresh air in.
Yes, and it said that home is where you can be yourself and be accepted. And so when our dreams bring us visions of a home, even if it's not the home that we remember, that it's different than what we remember our houses having been. But that's a very kind and gentle way to bring truth into our lives. But the important thing is we have to accept that, yes, this is a problem I'm facing and I need to change my way of thinking. And so if we use it as a guide and as a prod to make us think more clearly and objectively about our own lives, then that's the point. And so I think that when we think in terms of home in our dreams or in our daydreaming, then it's easier for us to be totally objective in our own lives, because too often we say, no, that doesn't apply to me. Well, we need to accept the fact that it might, and then look all the way through that situation.
Mhm. And going home to God, we talked about that at the beginning of the program. Of course, so often we think about that at the end of life, and
Yes.
we'll ultimately all go home to God, but we're always present with God in this present moment anyway. So it's not that we go home to God, it's that we go home in our way of thinking and in our unity of understanding and our unity of purpose and realization of who and what we are as perfect and whole children of God. But we can go home in our minds and in our spirits and in our bodies when we go into times of introspection, to reflection, to prayer, and to meditation. And it seems like we haven't talked about meditation in a couple of programs. That seems impossible. But we do go home to God in prayer and meditation, don't we?
Yes, we do. And that's a wonderful thing, that we can go home to God at any moment, at any time. And it's our privilege, and it's our right, it's our heritage. And sometimes we forget that we have that wonderful assistance available to us. And that's the joy of meditation, because then we get the answers to our questions, we get information that we're seeking. And so we're again doing ourselves an injustice when we don't use all the tools available to us. And we're not using all the tools available to us if we don't use prayer, meditation, introspection, and so forth, as you just described.
And when we do those things, we begin to heal.
Yes.
And we begin to walk down the road of guidance and direction that we need so desperately. And we also let the cares and concerns fall away from us in life. I know every Sunday when I lead the meditation and in our fellowship, I try to include the issue of inviting people to let the cares and concerns fade away. We need to step out of our cares and concerns, and we need to let go of all of those negative aspects of being, and even the positive aspects of being that are so demanding upon our time. And we need to just put ourselves as I've heard in the past, in neutral, don't we? We don't put ourselves in neutral often enough. We're always in drive, or most of us are in overdrive. And that taxes our bodies, it taxes our minds, and it taxes our spirit.
That's a wonderful analogy, putting ourselves in neutral, because it's only in that state of consciousness that we're able to really access the divine in our thinking and in our lives, isn't it? That's when we let go and let God. And I love that trite cliche, let go and let God. But we have to, but you always say, guide and direct me in the way I need to do, or whatever it is I'm trying to accomplish.
Yeah, we do. We need to get out of the way. And so often in our lives, we want to make the decisions. We want to be in control. We want to be the driver, if you will, of circumstance and situations, when in fact there's a marvelous cruise control that takes us home. And we're always going towards home, and we're always that home. And I think that's why, as we said in the beginning of the program, we are drawn to this feeling of wanting so desperately to be at home and to have this ideal home, because that is our nature. And that is what we know is the reality of our existence. But circumstances and situations and challenges and difficulties and this physical life convince us that that we're far from home. But we're never far from home, are we?
No, we aren't. And also, we need to accept the greatness of God, the greatness of our lives, the greatness of our own potential. And we need to accept that everything is available to us. And we need to look at others non-judgmentally and just see, we can, when we see children playing, they're so carefree and so wonderfully happy. It's just a joy to watch children play. And so if we look, and it's a joy for all of us, I'm sure, but if we look at the adults around us, or those in between growth stages, in the same light that we look at children, then and accept that, yes, this is what they need to be doing. I mean, I was playing with my little grandson and blowing bubbles, and he was batting the bubbles with his bat, and his little 2.5-year-old child had made me tired looking at him, because he was chasing these bubbles with his bat and hitting them with his bat. And then he went in and for some reason got his mother's rubber gloves from under the kitchen sink. He came out with those gloves on his hand, and he was bursting the bubbles with the gloves. And if we could look at, and that was such a happy, carefree time, but if we could look at all people in that same light, that whatever it is they're doing it because of the joy that's coming from their heart is impelling them or impressing them to do whatever it is they're doing. And if we look at others of any age, and whatever anyone chooses to do, as well, that's their right, and that's what that's what they're impressed to do at this moment, then we're happier and we don't get into negativity. And so, and then we release others then to be themselves.
Right. And in the last few moments that we have, or the last time we have in the program, we need to talk about the fact that we need to be willing to go home to God, and we need to be willing to let go of these things that we believe to be our homes into the reality of our eternal home. And so often in my talks, I try to weave in the importance of understanding and realization that this experience that we call death doesn't really separate us at all, and that we are moving towards a home that is eternal and that is in total unification with the presence and power of God, and in the total and complete realization of who and what we are. Now, that doesn't mean we have to accelerate that, nor should we. But we do have to say that this aspect of our homesick nature, or our homesick feeling sometimes that we have, is our desire to be not of this world and not in the world, and that we can choose to step out of this world and be at home while we're here in the physical, but that ultimately we're going to go home to a place that is outside of this world.
Yes, and when we look at it in that light, then our last days, months, or years here on earth are far more happily spent, because we're not spending energy dreading or in doubt, indulging in any negativity. We're just spending our energy enjoying while we're here, so that then we can go over into God's great country more freely free, And I think the way we go over determines what our state of consciousness on the inner planes, don't you?
Absolutely. And I think that that willingness to step over and that willingness to let go and that willingness to go home in a real and practical sense allows us to consciously let go of the circumstances, the situations of life, and the belief that we're really this physical body and that I'm really Mike Costello and this identity, but in fact I'm a lot more than that, and so are we all. And we need to be constantly aware of the fact that that stepping forth is not something that has to be dreaded or feared, and that as others around us step forth, and it's normal that we grieve and that we're sad in that
Of course.
process, and that it would be unnatural not to. That's part of the physical side of us. That's part of the holding on that we have. But we get better and better at detaching, and we get better and better at letting go, and we get better and better at rising in our consciousness to the highest level, and until ultimately we are ready and able to allow ourselves to rise. And that's what resurrection is about.
Yeah.
We are all destined to be resurrected into the presence and the power and the radiance of who and what we are as truly spiritual beings. And that doesn't, of course, detract at all from the wonderful lessons and the great joy that we have in this physical life. The physical life is wonderful, and even the death process sometimes is wonderful. And you and I have seen so many marvelous things happen in the final illnesses that people have.
Yes, and it's so inspiring to see people go over happily and joyously and freely, and it shows in their faces. They look so peaceful in death. And of course, back to being together and grieving for those whom we love, it's love or hate that draws us together lifetime after lifetime, and here on earth and on the inner planes of being. And so if we don't hate anyone, then we don't have to face that hate. But when we love, and we all love many, well, then we are rewarded by that, by being with those persons. So I think that's the bonus thought on about death, because that we will be together with those whom we love very, very quickly. And from what we read and what we hear about near-death experiences, it can seem like 40 years might seem like 14 minutes, because it's just such a very, very short time. And I think that's really very rewarding to think about, don't you?
Absolutely. We need to be at home where we are, and we need to be willing to let go and go home when it's time to do that. And we hope that the ideas and concepts we shared with you have been useful, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Mike and Iris would like to extend a cordial invitation for you to join them this Sunday morning at 11 a.m. for our weekly celebration service at the beautiful Seaport Marina Hotel at the corner of Pacific Coast Highway and 2nd Street, adjacent to the Marina Pacifica and Marketplace shopping centers. There will be a guided meditation, prayers, spirited music, and a dynamic, life-changing new thought message. Please join us this Sunday. You will be warmly welcomed into the company of like-minded, positive, and uplifting people. And remember, whatever your dream, whatever your vision, you can attain it through confident living.